Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of GeekVerse podcast. Oh my goodness, that is some loud background noise out there. However, I am here, the therapist, Taterfield. Today, I'm not really a therapist. My name, because in reference to today's episode, we are diving into episode 6, the spoilers review for the Chucky season 2 series. Yes, that is right. This one's coming a little bit delayed because we wanted to just make sure that Black Panther was, getting a little bit of the attention here. I didn't want Chucky to outshine the Wakanda or anything like that, but definitely check that out on our feeds because that is dropped and it is definitely a really solid review. We have a Travis Told You that's dropping tomorrow. And then we have just a plethora of other content that's just popping off. Me and Kirklin did a newscast. We got GV Side Quest that's popping off here. I believe Dylan's diving into Ragnarok, God of War, the latest title there. But yeah, just ladies and gentlemen, with your internet connection, you can find us in the search bar. GeekVerse.ca is our home base. GeekVerseCast is our Twitter. GeekVerse on our Facebook. You can also find us on Patreon. We get ad-free early episodes available there and supporting the show. I need to extend a huge thank you to these legendary folks. Aaron Braden, April of Darkness, Smalley Biggs, Joshua Wright. You people are fantastic. Thank you for all that you do being a Patreon producer. Additionally, if you are also wanting to find some other cool deals, you can check us out on Manscaped, where you get free shipping with the promo code GVPOD. That is Manscaped, 20% off with the code GVPOD. But without further ado, let's get into our non-spoilers thoughts of Chucky episode 6. So we get a lot of stuff in this episode. I feel like this was definitely building up towards what we're leading into the finale here coming up soon, and it's just fantastic to kind of get caught off guard with all of these narratives coming together here. Because the last week's episode, we ended on a big cliffhanger, and I was really curious. Okay, what are the connections here with these characters? What is the Doctor here all of a sudden connected to with Andy and with Chucky? And we got our first look at the Colonel. So all of these different things were unfolding, and you're just wondering, how are things going to tie off into this next episode? It did not slow down. It really escalated. And while a lot of the narratives were set in this episode, just kind of like pieces on a chessboard, and they're all being placed around the board and kind of being established. Okay, we're going to be making our move here in the next episode, and it's just going to all come into fruition together. And that's what I'm really, really juicing for, because this episode did a good job setting everything up. I have all my notes listed here and kind of like bullet points and like going all the way down just so we can kind of go through the episode together. And I'm really looking forward to this. So again, if you haven't seen the episode, go watch it and then come back, because this episode dives into so many different things. We get a lot more progression with our characters and just a lot of surprises overall. It caught me off guard because one thing regarding a certain thing that I was reiterating last week when I was doing the episode 5 review, I just couldn't be sure about it, and it was questionable. But then when we got into this episode, it was still very questionable. But then finally, things happened. I thought, oh my god, it really got me. I can't believe I fell for that. So really, really overall fantastic episode. So I don't have much I can really say non-spoilers wise. I'm just gonna be getting into the spoilers. So again, go watch the episode, and when you have, come back, because in 3, 2, 1, here we are. Right off the hop, we learn the Doctor was Charles Lee Ray's therapist at the school. And later on in the episode, we learn that she was trying to somewhat, I don't want to say stamp out the goodness, but really just kind of like channel him to be into who he was. She wasn't helping the situation nonetheless. And on top of this, we learn that the Colonel is torturing the shit out of Andy. Just been peeling away his flesh, eating it, and I don't know how this show is PG-14. Like, seriously, it's PG-14. This is a brutal show, but I digress. So we kind of get tidbits here of there's some kind of huge, larger overall plan that's looming in, and the Doctor is obviously on Charles's side. The Colonel doesn't really want anything to do with this, because we kind of get more into He doesn't want anything to do with the main plan. And with this whole opening sequence here, when we got Lexi and Devin kind of sneaking or snooping in and watching this, we get kind of a little bit more context with the scene opener of the aftermath of the crash when Andy's rams the delivery truck off the cliff. This is when we learn about Chucky Prime. This is the very first Chucky. I love these titles. We got the Colonel, the Muscle, Chucky Prime. And Chucky Prime, as it says, he's the first. He's the one from the OG Chucky movie. And this is the current Chucky residing in Nika. But like I said earlier, the Colonel isn't big on this Prime Chucky. He doesn't really believe in allocating the plot to accommodate him. Every Chucky is kind of out for themselves, you could say. So he takes it onto himself with the Doctor to eliminate the kids, along with the other Chuckies. Now, we'll probably speak more to the along the other Chuckies kind of thing too. But so they're kind of turning on Prime Chucky, but the Doctor wants Prime Chucky to get here. Prime Chucky is in Nika. So during this time, the Colonel heads to the school. Lexi and Devin sneak in. They free Andy. Andy's tripping out, but then catches on oh yeah, okay, I recognize you guys. And so they head back to the school. And now we also get another scene here of Sister Ruth in full service to Buff Chucky. She is just you're the Lord Savior. You've risen again. She's gone. Now with Trevor gone, our crew is still in school. They're subjected to these draconian measures. So again, the crew that's in school, not Devin and Lexi, because they're off kind of exploring. This is Nadine and Jake. And so Father Bryce basically locks down the school. And this is when they're going to the front door now to seal the deal, lock the doors. And Lexi and Devin return to the school, and they have Andy with them. So this really, really made me laugh because he looks like a Jesus. He looks like a Jesus. He's got the long beard. He's just wearing raggedy clothing, the long hair. And this show, they know what they're doing, and they're playing on all cylinders right now with this kind of stuff. And it's not it's not offensive by any means. They're just being so subtle with it. It's just making it, I feel laughable to a degree. So Lexi and Devin are both we left, but we found this man, and he brought us back to the school. I'm paraphrasing here, but he and the kids are all oh, he helped us find the light. And then Andy's these angels showed me mercy. And he looks like Jesus. So we get this confrontation between Devin and Lexi just kind of dealing with Father Bryce here, and just he dismisses them. And then we get more confrontation with, I can't remember her name, but she's another one of the sisters. And she's kind of advocating for the kids. Just yeah, we need to help this man, Father Bryce. The Lord's word can't only benefit you in your time of what you say goes. So they bring in Andy and they put him up in a bed upstairs. And that's when things get interesting, because the Doctor returns. The Doctor has the Colonel. And this is when Father Bryce kind of sees the Colonel and was okay, what the heck? You have another one of these dolls, and where's its hair and all that stuff? The Doctor's oh, I use this doll for trauma victims and just kind of helping the students out with the sessions. Father Bryce is completely oblivious and just believes it, but he moseys on. And then as Lexi and Devin are on their way back to their room, they bump into the Doctor. And the Doctor does a full-on confrontation with them. Doesn't have the doll at this time, but just basically says you're gonna die, I'm gonna watch Chucky kill you, and just totally lays them out. And how the Colonel wanted to keep them all alive at the school so that they could be killed together. Now we finally transition back to Glenda, and it's somewhat an opposite of what Glenn's scene was from last week, where they experienced the dream again. Glenn also sends Glenda a photo of the doll, also stating how it is a birthday gift from their mother. We then get some dialogue here between Kyle, Nika, and Glenda, in which Nika reveals that there is someone waiting to help Chucky Prime. I assume that's where the Colonel comes into play, that it's supposed to be the therapist doctor, and that Colonel's going to kind of offer up either his body or one of the Chucky doll bodies, and we're just going to kind of go from there. Although the curse changed, and this is where I don't know how convoluted it's going to get or how passionate they're going to be about adhering to the Chucky canon or the overall kind of the curse, how it works, because Chucky transferred his soul into Nika, therefore voiding the curse of being bound to Andy Barclay, I imagine. But then that was also voided because, noting in Chucky 3, he's going to take over the other kid's body. Now, that is the result of, okay, the curse works where the first person you tell your secret to, that's the body you have to take over. Well, that was Andy. He did get that new body come Chucky 3 or Child's Play 3. So that kid was definitely up to bat and was at risk, but thankfully the kid did not get taken over possessed by Chucky, which is great. But how many of these new bodies have occurred? Because that's where it gets very, very convoluted and crazy. Because I'd have to go back and watch Curse of Chucky and properly analyze this and deep dive, because he takes over Nika's body. So again, like, how does that happen, and what is he voiding here? Because we had it where Jennifer Tilly and Tiffany Valentine, their whole kind of thing, adhering to the curse and how you like first person you tell. If I remember correctly, yeah, because that worked. They swap bodies. But I digress. I did think that, okay, maybe they were keeping Andy alive here because Chucky was going to, or Chucky Prime was going to come here and finally take Andy's body. But it seems a little convoluted because as we progress later on, the doctor like, there's only one good Chucky body left. So it kind of insinuates, oh, okay, they still want the good Chucky doll to put Charles Lee Ray's like Prime version into that body. So we've got some ground to cover. We need to see and figure out how they're going to navigate these murky waters and kind of explain all that. So we'll figure it out. But before I continue on, we're going to jump to a quick ad break and we will be right back. And we're back. So we get a scene here where Kyle lets Chucky out of Nika for a discussion, and it gets heated. I don't know why they left the bloody prosthetic arms on Nika Chucky Prime, because just smacks the gun out of Kyle's hand, and this puts Glenda into a position of power with the gun to actually shoot and kill Kyle, but she chooses not to. She does not, they do not. They choose not to. They do not like listening to Chucky just screaming and just kind of dishing out orders and such. They choose to just ignore that, and I don't want to say they plead with Kyle, but they insist, like, Kyle, like, just make him stop, And so Kyle smacks Chucky, and then Chucky snaps out of it and turns back to Nika. So they are finally kind of just at ease, and they give the gun back to Kyle, and that's all squared away. We go back at the school now, and we learn that Devin and Jake, they form a plan to control what happens in their room. They know, okay, we're under draconian measures, we're very limited here, but they know that they need backup. They need Lexi, Nadine, and even good Chucky. And it's going to be a fight on their turf. We can also take into the fact that multiple Chuckies are all against each other right now, which has me giddy, because this is not something that I've ever seen before, and it's just very crazy and barbaric and nuts, and it's fantastic. Andy has been taken care of in the med bay. He manages to sneak a knife, though, and prepares himself. And then we get Sister Ruth running to Father Bryce, shows him buff Chucky. Of course, Chucky is acting stagnant and inanimate, as he often does, and Father Bryce is trying to make Sister Ruth reclaim her sanity. She is resilient and has absolutely no part of interest wanting to kind of like admit that Father Bryce is right to some degree. She's just insistent that the doll is really the Lord who has risen, and Father Bryce is like, oh my God, you're so full of shit. So she takes Chucky back to her room, and after Father Bryce reiterates that the school is on lockdown, for some reason, Father Bryce allows her to take the doll with her, which doesn't make any sense. He's just got, he's had it up to here with these dolls, but he's just letting them off on the hook, letting them off the hook with them, basically. The doctor is the exception, but Sister Ruth is already kind of not all there. So all of a sudden, we cut to a wild team death match here. More like free for all, I guess. Just literally on the table. We got the Colonel versus the Muscle. But shit, Buff Chucky is already dying. He was eating these religious crackers and didn't stop to think that the Colonel poisoned them. So we don't even get the fight. We get some crazy intense dialogue with these two Chuckies pissed off at each other. The Colonel talking, I can't even do his accent. He's like, you shouldn't eat the cookies there. They're a little poisoned. It's about brains over matter, muscle, something like that. It's actually not a bad accent. Then I kind of hear it in my head, but they're all talking tough and everything. So Muscle Chucky dies. He gets poisoned. And he's just, not having a good time anymore. So that's one Chucky off the board. We're now at a time where Lexi and Nadine sneak into the room with Devin and Jake. Devin mentions how the Colonel actually killed many of the other Chuckies. And this is interesting because it goes hand in hand with how the Colonel was talking about just ignoring Chucky Prime. And it goes a little bit too hand in hand with the intro sequence here of the other Chuckies just kind of blowing up in the van. All these other Chuckies that maybe did survive the van are all put on a horror show all around the original cabin here on the school grounds. So the Colonel does not give a shit about the other Chuckies and is killing them left, right, and center. So we see Nadine here, as I was mentioning, since they snuck into the room, unpacking a ton of sort of weaponry. Questionable, but acceptable. And now Lexi's starting to freak out. And good Chucky walks over and decides to give her some drugs to calm her down. And this is where it's questionable because it's hard to know the sincerity of this. And he's questionable. But you're looking at it from a point too where his innocence is maybe at play here. He was before inquiring about her boyfriend and just kind of yes, definitely poking the soft spots, but it's not in a way where you can deem sinister, but you can look at it as questionable. So, yes, she accepts it, and then this is when shit hits the fan because the Colonel enters the room. But we see him fall all of a sudden with a pair of shears in the back of his head, planted by Andy. So here we are. The Colonel, as they hyped up, is now totally gone. But as he's gone, we get a absolutely bonkers Vietnam PTSD scene of the Colonel, him just dying and having these flashbacks. Just crazy. But at this point, as he dies, good Chucky recognizes Andy, sort of. But I wouldn't put this good Chucky as fully good at this point. This is, again, after the drug sequence and then just kind of recognizing Andy, it just is it's peculiar. So we get another scene of Ruth praising over her dead lord, Buff Chucky. And then she pledges to avenge him. So we know she is totally down the rabbit hole now. We get another scene of Ruth we learn that Ruth needs Chucky Prime here to take possession of the last good guy doll. Now we learn that Ruth needs Chucky Prime. Why did I write Ruth in my notes here? Now we learn that Ruth needs Chucky Prime here to take possession of the last good guy. Definitely not Ruth that needs that. We learn that the Doctor needs Chucky Prime here to take possession of the last good guy doll. And that Kyle and company are on their way to the school. So this is what I was talking about in the non-spoilers component here, where we got all these narratives that are going to be merging to each other, and I get so giddy at this. Now, Andy almost kills good Chucky, but that's just when the therapist arrives to take good Chucky away. Now, this is where it escalates out the wazoo, because all of a sudden, we have Father Bryce and the other sister, who's not Ruth, appear, and the therapist tries to convince them that she's a ventriloquist. Doesn't pan out as good as she hoped, because Chucky reaches and grabs her gun. The sister gets hit with a crossfire bullet in the shoulder, and good Chucky runs away. Andy tackles the therapist. They go down the stairs, and the therapist knocks him out and then goes back up and basically holds Father Bryce and the sister at gunpoint while Andy's knocked out. So Nadine runs off to find good Chucky. The gang is running after Nadine, basically. Now, Father Bryce and the sister, they know at this point, okay, Chucky is a real moving doll now, so it's fucking wild. But I'm curious to see how that's going to unfold in the next episode, if they're going to team up with the kids or what's going to go down. I digress. This is where the line is drawn. Good Chucky is at the top of the clock tower, and you know something is sus. He's baiting Nadine out to the window, like, oh, you're like a fairy, and he's still acting super innocent. You're a fairy, fairies, what they like to do, they like to fly. And he pushes her out the window, and she sadly doesn't make it. And her land is very, very brutal because it's right in the hands of a statued cement angel. And so, yeah, she didn't make it. It wasn't great. Lexi was right there to almost save her, however, after running up the stairs. And this is where it's an interesting little misdirect dialogue from Chucky, because when she's there and she's reaching over the edge, Chucky, I can't even remember what he says, but he kind of alludes to some kind of I'm on the inside cover kind of thing. And he immediately turns when Jake and Devin get to the top of the stairs and just says, "Jake, what have I done?" In that innocent Chucky voice. Lexi's not having it. So all in all the Chuckies need to die, just like Andy said. Nadine's death is unfortunately on Jake here, no matter which way you want to paint it, because while there's still a lot at play here, it came down to Jake that they should have just killed him. But I do feel like, okay, this Chucky, he's not just having like unknown relapses here of killing people. He is totally conscious of what he's doing, and this is just playing into his game. He's definitely very, very intelligent. This is where it feels like the climactic conclusion is coming into the school here. We got Tiffany, Jennifer, Glenn en route, also Kyle, Glenda, Charles, and Nika en route. There's one last mint condition Chucky doll left. 2 Chucky souls still in play with this like poser Chucky and then Chucky Prime. We have a rogue sister Ruth who's going to be killing for buff Chucky. Killer therapist who's got the other sister and Father Bryce under lockdown. All the kids are still in their rooms not knowing what's going on. What we're going to see next is absolutely beyond me. And Andy is knocked out, so I'm curious how that's going to go. But I'm just absolutely ecstatic for this. This is going to be a great like next step we're going to be taking with these characters, and I can't wait to see what we get this week. So that is it for my spoilers review for episode 6 of the Chucky season 2. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back when we review the next episode coming up. But until then, take care, and we'll see you in the search bar. Have a good one.